Will Goldstein here, thekingscourt.com. Feel free to subscribe if you like the videos. So this video is called Free Will or Not, the age-old debate over free will or determinism. So, you can see I'm dressed in black and white. So the white is for the good and the black is for bad, because this is all about choices. And just an interesting thing about me, I was born on November 1st at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 hours after the end of Halloween, so sort of in between good and evil, and my whole life has been sort of that. And so working that problem out. So this debate over free will and determinism has been going on for a very long time. I didn't look back to the very beginning of it, but some prominent voices on this subject are Anselm, or before that Augustine, Erasmus, and Martin Luther. Those are a few names that have written on this. I'm sure there's a lot more. So my argument is they're both true, but in context. So it's not one or the other. So I built a couple axioms to base this talk on. So God is number one is God is the essence of justice, and that necessitates rewards for the good or the righteous. So because he's just, that's following justice. But it also, for those who are unjust, it necessitates punishment, because that's what justice is. So in order to make that decision by God, there has to be a will to make that choice. And so my definition of the will is the active agent of choice. So when people make choices, they're making choices based on whatever seems beneficial to the person who's making the choice. I'm not saying that beneficial is necessarily good. Somebody might think it's beneficial to go rob a bank, but to their mind, they're thinking that this is beneficial. So so you basically have positive forces and you have negative forces that need to be evaluated. So when somebody's making those choices, they have to get choices that are made from sources of information, right? And that's how they make the choice. You debate whether you're going to do this, you do that, and you look at the pros and cons of everything. So at this point, I'm getting more to the will or the ego or the active agent of deciding. And so this is maybe based a tiny bit on Freud, but I don't know that much about Freud. But I'm just using some of the, I think you'll get the idea. So on one side, you have, I think what Freud would call the superego. I would label it more the conscience, morals, the Holy Spirit, guardian angels that are giving you, these are all positive forces. The Bible, from good friends that are maybe Christian friends, or counselors that you go to that are steering you in the right direction. Maybe this video. So the it is the other side of the story, and that's the antagonist over there, the devil's advocate. You might look at that as the world, or temptation, or demonic spirits, lust of the flesh, bad company. So now at this point, this is sort of, I'm setting up the whole framework and foundation for this talk, really. So now let's just get to the basics of life. So you have a baby that's born, and a lot of people would say that this baby is born with a clean slate. I suppose that could be debatable, and I'm going to give some reasons for that. But some babies are prone more towards the good a little bit, and some of them are prone more towards cantankerous. Some others sleep through the night and others don't. And even that, look, I'm just kind of, you'll see my point if you stick with this. So, and maybe this is true. So, if you have a very good-natured baby from the beginning, well, maybe this is a reward to a parent because they were so kind to their parents and so obedient to their parents. Maybe if a baby is cantankerous, well, the baby came from that parent, and if that parent was cantankerous and gave their parents a lot of trouble, well, maybe this is justice playing itself out. So what I'm trying to say is it's justice even in infancy. That's the point I'm trying to make. So there's basically two options as this baby grows into a child and into manhood or womanhood, whatever. So they can tend. Some babies are going to tend more toward, everybody makes good choices and some bad choices. That's just life. But there's degrees. So some babies some people may tend to make more good choices, and some make more bad choices, and some are very good choices, and some are very bad choices. And so as the person continues to make good choices, then they're going to feel more free and happy and joyful in life. If they tend to make bad choices, well, we do something bad, what ends up happening? We get punishment. So, when you're raising a child, if you care about the child, most people would say that there would have to be some consequences and disciplines to give a child, to steer that child in the right direction. A lot of kids that go completely off the track, it's because they had no discipline and no guidance when they were young. And when you have punishment, well, if punishment is, if some people correct their actions after they've been punished, other people are more defiant. When people become defiant, what happens to them? They go to prison. When they go to prison, they have a loss of freedom. They have a loss of free will. They can no longer do what they want. They're behind bars. They may even be in a chain gang or like a slave doing some kind of work that they really don't want to do because, this is their punishment. So what I'm saying is this is the groundwork for determinism. So determinism sets in when you've lost your freedom. So now it's determined for you. It's equal to slavery, basically. It's a loss of free will to do good, and there's degrees of bondage. For example, we make some good choices, we make some bad choices. The more good choices that you make, then the more free you're going to feel. The more to do good. The more bad choices that you make, the more you're going to feel like you're in bondage. So there's degrees of freedom and degrees of bondage. And life presents endless opportunities for you to make either one. So if someone makes continued very bad choices, well, then it leads to things like addiction, and they're maybe incapable of resisting evil forces. For example, someone who's hooked on pornography or something like that, they just can't resist those forces, or drugs or whatever that they're, or if they're in a gang and their friend comes over and says, hey, we're gonna rob a bank. Just can't resist. Okay, they just go along with the flow because they're just locked in. So but the end, for someone who has any kind of conscience left in this slavery, it produces degrees of torment and pain, and for some, remorse and sorrow, and they wish they would have made some better choices. So God looks at the situation. He's a compassionate God, and he is a compassionate God. However, there are some cases in the Bible where it seems to suggest that, even though people come weeping in tears bitterly before God, there are some cases in the Bible, I didn't take the time to look them up, but they're there, where God is not going to hear their crying and weeping, and I don't think God is permanently in that position. I just think at that time he's not, and I think there's reasons why maybe that's God's attitudes towards some people, is that maybe they have been defiant over a long period of time. They've had a resistant to many admonitions and countless opportunities that maybe they had to make better choices, and they continued to persist in their wickedness. And at that point, maybe God doesn't hear their tears. And that doesn't mean they can't change. That just means at that point, they're going to have to, before they're going to get God's listening ear, they're going to have to make some serious changes in their decision making. So, for the most part, God is quite merciful, endless mercy, long-suffering, and there to offer help. And for those who really seek it, the Holy Spirit can be there if they're a Christian, or even prevenient grace, I think is what it's called. For people who are not yet maybe believers, but God has grace on them anyway. So there's the church and things like that. So life is full of daily battles. So and it's really an opportunity to make good choices, and when there's temptations, to resist those temptations. As I said before, so we have increased freedom to choose good as we, in our daily battles, make good choices. If we make bad choices, then the forces, negative forces that are in our life, gain strength and power over us, and we become weakened and less able to make good choices. But as time goes on, if we do resist, we can make better choices and eventually be freed from that overwhelming force to do something against your will, determinism. So, so like I said, bad choices increase slavery, determinism, and bondage go hand in hand, a loss of freedom. So the next part of this is basically has to do with Calvinism and determinism. So it's another aspect of determinism. And my point on this is I'm not pro-determinism from a Calvinist position. And the reason why is it's, to me, at least in my thinking, so look, I'm not saying that, I'm not even saying they're wrong, okay? I just can't, there's no way I can reconcile that with that, the philosophy of predestination in their thinking. I cannot reconcile that there's a just God. It's impossible to me. So what I'm going to explain is there's two basic positions for this predestination, or two options, I guess, so you would say. So in other words, there's determinism based on God's free will to make some for good purposes. So some are saved. He's choosing before they're ever born, he's choosing them for good purposes, in other words, to be saved, or they would say irresistible grace. And then there's the opposite, and some for bad based on, but the problem is the ones that are chosen for bad, there's nothing that's based on merit for good or punishment for bad, because this was all chosen before they existed. This is crazy. I mean, they would say, for the people that are chosen to be saved, that it's the irresistible force to save them, but yet they lead the others who God purposefully created them for damnation, as far as they're concerned. It's hopeless. There's nothing that they can possibly do. I don't want to make this whole video about this. To me, it's just an unjust God. So I do believe in foreknowledge, but that's different. Foreknowledge and predestination are not the same thing. Foreknowledge, God can offer free will to someone, and they can make their choices through life, and God can foreknow what those choices are, but they still are free to make those choices. So God is outside of time. So he sees them marching through their life, and he may even know, before they were even born, in a sense, because he's outside of time, what they're going to do. But they still were free to make those choices, and he just simply knew. That's foreknowledge. That seems much more, and that's biblical. So I do believe that. So God is the essence of justice. Therefore, it is impossible for him to be unjust. It's just impossible. Anytime you come up with something that makes God out to be unjust, God is the essence of justice. He cannot be unjust. And also, I believe it's a very dangerous belief system to hold. This is my personal opinion. So I'm going to give an example, for example, in the story of Esther. And I'm not going to go through a long story about the story of Esther. If you want to read the book, I think it's a great book. But you have a few characters in there, and one of them's called Haman. And, he wants to send Mordecai to the gallows. And he's also, really hates the Jews. And Esther is married, to the king. And so at the end of the day, at the end of this story, which I'm not going to go into all the details, he was trying to get Mordecai hanged. Okay, and he ended up being hanged, which is what he deserved, because he was unjust in his wanting to have Mordecai hanged. So the king, who actually, Haman was high up underneath the king, but the king looked at him and said, this is completely unjust, and hanged him instead. So what I'm saying out of this is, those who make God out to be unjust make him the author of evil. And God cannot be the author of evil. Evil exists, but it's based on the decisions that people make in the world. God created a world where evil exists, but God never promotes evil. So, like I said, those who make God out to be unjust make him to be an author of evil. Therefore, since they are so willing to see the unfortunate damned with no compassion or mercy, at least it seems like it, they're just rejoicing in the fact that they are saved. And it doesn't seem like it really affects their heart that these people are damned. It's just like, well, I'm one of the lucky ones and they're not. And that's the way this theology comes across to me. And I'm just saying, perhaps, I can emphasize that word, perhaps, because God is the judge of all. Perhaps God has set the gallows for some of them. And so, if they don't really care that little about the souls of people, that they think that this God can just make people without any hope and completely hopeless, and they can be damned to hell, and they're just free to go in their paradise, well, maybe God has made the gallows for them. And I think it's a very dangerous theology, and I would never dream of holding that theology. He who shows mercy will receive mercy. That's in the Bible. Where there is no mercy shown, there will be none given. And that's biblical. And I think that can, I'm not making any judgments myself, but I can say that can have some standing. So my conclusion in this video is that freedom as regards the will is only freedom as it is associated to righteousness. So when you make good choices, then freedom is that ability to continue to be free from a lot of demonic and tempting forces. I'm not saying that they won't come at some point, because they might. And then if you make bad choices, well, then you're backsliding again. But freedom is, continued freedom comes when you make good choices in your daily life. So life presents us with endless opportunities to make those choices. And we can continue to do good and hopefully resist evil. And we can only do that through the presence of the Holy Spirit. So I'm not a big fan of Martin Luther, but one of the songs, "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God," he has something on the devil, and I'm just kind of doing it from memory, so I think it's pretty close. So his craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate, on earth there is not his equal, or something very close to that, in one of Martin Luther's hymns. The reason why I'm quoting that is because if you try to stand against the forces of evil, humanity is not equipped. Martin Luther in that instance is right on. You are not equipped to stand against those kind of demonic and extremely powerful evil forces. So to regain your freedom, you need to resist these forces. You can only resist these forces with the help of one greater than the devil in power, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit that can be within you as a believer is capable of doing just that. So as you cling to Christ, cling to the Holy Spirit within you, then you can learn how to, with more success over time, resist these forces. So Christ in me is the hope of glory. With the wise counsel of the Holy Spirit within, we can overcome. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and check out my music because I'm a musician. Check out my music. There's lots of places, but one of the places is at Pandora, I keep saying, the King's Court artist, or the King's Court Radio even. That's a mix of my music with a bunch of other people's music. So some great artists on there. Hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe.